Hello, welcome to Sip's Wood Chips. I'm Sip Mendes, and what I want to talk about today are chisels and chisel handles. This chisel I purchased at a garage sale, and I think I might have paid about $2 for it. And what I do a lot of is what a lot of people will now call upcycling. So, I purchased this old chisel, and I want to make it into a better chisel. I like the chisel. It's made of good hard steel. It's a little bit hard to sharpen. Once it has a sharp edge, it keeps a sharp edge. And it's a long time before it needs to be resharpened. This chisel was made with a steel cap. So it's made to strike with a hammer. And I would rather use a mallet. And I'm afraid that these steel caps will tear up my mallets. So what I've done in the past is made a wooden handle, and I'm going to show you how to make that today. All you need is a piece of oak. I have oak or other strong wood, and a piece of this is a 3/4 inch copper coupling. I'm going to cut it in half and use it for the ferrule like I did on this one. So let's get started. So this is a very sharp chisel, and I've covered the tip with some tape for safety purposes. So the first thing we need to do with this chisel is look it over, and what we really want to do is look inside. So by placing a small flashlight in here, you can see what's in there. I hope this shows up good on the video. If you look in here, you will see that there is a little air pocket at the end of the shank of the chisel, and the chisel only comes up to this ring here. It only comes up to that top ring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a saw, a hacksaw, and we're going to cut that off. So I'm going to start cutting this off at the top ring, and hopefully, well, I'm going to go a little bit higher. I'm going to start cutting this off a little bit above that top ring. I want to cut through the airspace that's above the shank. And I'm just going to use a hacksaw. You can see I actually cut right across the airspace that was there, and the shank is right in here. Now what I want to do is I want to cut across there with the hacksaw all the way down to here, and that way I can break apart the plastic. I'm going to go ahead and cut down this other side and see what luck I have. See if I can use these pliers to break this free. There it goes, came right off. So that shows me what the shank looks like. And so I'll just have to drill a hole into my handle to keep this in place. It looks like it's about 5/16 of an inch thick. So when I'm ready to mount this in my handle, I'll drill a 5/16 hole. Here's the piece of wood I'm going to start with. I'm going to take that over to my wood lathe and round it off. And it should be just large enough. I'm going to do a little backward. Since I have a center hole over here, I'm going to use that center to drill the hole for the shank. So, here's where my ferrule is going to go. Here's the high point, and here is the final length. And here is the smallest diameter. The inside diameter of this ferrule is 7/8 of an inch. So the first thing I need to do is take a parting tool and make that 7/8 of an inch. Got a 1/4 inch parting tool. And that should fit my ferrule just fine. So the next part is this taper, and then the shallow. We'll check this thickness here. It's here. I got quite a ways to go. Use my skew chisel to shape it a bit. And I'm going to plane it off. Use my half round to detail it a little bit. Okay, I'm going to sand that a little bit. We'll see how close we are. Let me go ahead and put a little groove in there. And I'll sand it offline because my dust collector is so loud. So here's my handle after the first sanding. I cut it back a little bit here so I get the sandpaper behind the heel of the handle. I've only sanded it with 220 sandpaper. I'm going to go ahead and give it a coat of sanding sealer. That'll dry pretty fast, and then I can resand it with 320. So I'm going to give it a coat of lacquer-based sanding sealer. That should dry in about 30 minutes and I'll be ready for the second sanding. This oak has some very, very tiny splintering that's occurring, and I don't like for those little ends to stick up. So this will bring out the colors in it, and so this will bring out the colors in it and seal the wood down good. And I want it to soak in real good into the fibers. I'll let that dry for about 30 minutes or so. So here is my tool handle. The sanding sealer has dried for about 30 minutes, and it's easy to feel some very tiny raising of the grain in the wood. So I'm going to sand that with 220 and then 320, and then I'll give it the first coat of clear lacquer. That went pretty well. I sanded it with 220 and 320 sandpaper, and all of that little raised grain is gone. I'm going to give it a coat of a clear wood finish, which is a lacquer-based satin. And I'll let that dry for about 30 minutes, and then without sanding I'll give it a second coat. Okay, I cut my coupling in half with a hacksaw as best I could, following the line. You can tell it's a little bit crooked, but what I can do is I took a little block of wood, and on my wood lathe I turned a little spigot that fits tightly inside the coupling, and then I can use that as a vise to hold it. And I'm going to use my file just to square it up a little bit. So I've given my handle 2 coats of satin lacquer. I've cut my ferrule. That's ready. It still has a rough edge, and it's got the manufactured edge. I'm going to measure my shank against my drill bit. This is a 5/16 drill bit to match the size of my shank. Yours might be different. I'm going to put a piece of tape a little bit further down than what I need, and that's so that make sure that it travels all the way in and has a little bit of extra room. I'm going to set my lathe down to 250 RPM. So okay, I withdrew my my quill all the way in, locked my tailstock. I'm starting the lathe, and slowly I'm going to drill in and retract it every so often, just to make sure that any debris is clear. And this is my Harbor Freight chuck, my $9.95 special. It should bottom out on this. Okay. I think my ferrule is going to be a little bit loose. It is a little bit loose. But I'm going to cover that with epoxy and fill the center hole with epoxy and assemble it. But first of all, I need to part this off. So I'm ready to part this off. There it goes. I think my block actually moved a tiny little bit, and so it got off center. And I'll go ahead and sand that by hand and finish it up, give it a couple of coats of lacquer. I've mixed up my epoxy, and I'm going to go ahead, it's 5-minute epoxy, so I don't have much time. I'm going to rub it on there. I'm going to put a little bit inside the ferrule. Make sure I have the ferrule, the good side down against here. That seems like it went on good. I'm going to put some epoxy in here. I'm going to put some epoxy in on the shank. It's thickening fast. And make sure the inside of this is also glued well. Now, that worked part way. Looks like it's plenty tight. And my ferrule seems to be well seated. I just need a piece of cloth to remove any excess epoxy. I'm going to use a rag soaked with a little bit of rubbing alcohol, and that takes off epoxy before it sets. Okay, and there's my chisel. I'm going to go ahead and take a file, and I will finish off this ferrule. Okay. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, click on like, and don't forget to subscribe.